Afternoon. Good afternoon, Ellie. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for inviting me to do this.
Absolutely. And I just want to welcome our viewers and our listeners to the Healthy Peaceful Podcast. And this is Noreen. Today I have a wonderful guest, Ellie Hadsall. And I'm just going to take a brief moment and I'll try to be more brief with my bios. I received some feedback regarding that. But all of Ellie's information will be included in the show notes as well. Um, Ellie considers herself a work in progress. Her life has been filled with twists and turns that have led her on a wildly imaginative and rewarding journey. She holds life as an assignment to gain insights, expand understanding, and joyfully assist others to forge their own journey. She is a spiritual mentor and an author. She honors and has learned from all authentic spiritual traditions. And her website is her name, elliehadsall.com. But again, I'll include all of that information in the show notes. And I also had actually, and we're going to get into the details of some of your twists and turns, but I wanted to actually, yes, I just said some, not all. I wanted to start off by a quote in one of your most recent books called Spirit Dancer, A Soul's Journey Through Parallel Lives. And this is a quote from Rumi. When you do things from the soul, you feel a river moving in you, a joy. Can you speak to the significance of that quote and how it's impacted your professional work and your life?
I really feel a lot of emotional connection with that particular quote. I believe that we all are in a flow of grace, a flow of divine supporting energy that moves us through lifetimes, multiple lifetimes. As a soul, we're on a journey. And when we connect with that flow, it's like a river running through us. It feeds us, it nourishes us, it enlivens us. It brings us what we need. Sometimes it brings debris down the river that we have to
True.
move through. Sometimes sparkling light on the river. It's just, there's so many things about our soul that flows. And if we can think of our life as a part of that flowing, then we don't have to be so fearful of the journey. We don't have to feel so unsupported. We can just sort of ride the wave that takes us along, but we get to make choices and decisions along the way that determine the outcomes. So that's the freedom of being liberated as a soul, to experiment, to learn, and to expand our understanding.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I know in your most recent work is you've been working on a book, which is you've actually written several books, which I'll touch on, obviously. But your most recent book is you describe it as a how-to manual in a way on meditation and the daily practice of meditation. And part in the introduction of the book, or at least at the start of the book, you indicate that why another book on meditation? And could you speak to that? Like, just respond to your own inquiry.
There are so many books out there on meditation. And I learned it in 1973. And since that time, my journey in this lifetime has been to learn from many traditions, to get the heart, the essence of each tradition, and to try to apply it in my own life. And so learning meditation, I didn't just learn it from my original source. I just investigated many other modes of meditation from across the world in multiple cultures. And I found that not only with meditation, but with the virtues and ethics and morality, that the things that move us towards harmonious existence are there in all authentic traditions. Most of the core culture it comes from. But I wanted to share with the world the variety of meditation techniques I've learned from these diverse cultures. Many people have learned meditation and greatly benefited from one particular tradition. They've also benefited from a particular tradition that is related to a spiritual path or religion. And I am all for that. If it works for somebody, I think that's marvelous, and you should stay with whatever works for you. I've also learned there's many people who have connected with one and they get stuck. They get the benefits from one tradition or one type of meditation. Let's say they learn a particular mantra, which is a sound, and they learn that and they're really anchored to it because it's helped them. And at some point, they need to grow further. They need to experiment with other methods that might take them to a different direction or something even better and more expansive. So rather than being attached to anything that has brought us to where we are now, it's very important to consider, well, what's next? What else? Take the value of what you've learned and move forward with it, but see, there's more value out there. There's more options. There's more things to learn. And the book talks about that. It talks about people who've been stuck in one tradition and can't expand their understanding because they're anchored to something that isn't working for them anymore. Maybe they were single when they did it and now they're married with children, or maybe they practiced diligently for 2 hours a day, but now they have a full-time job and they're parenting or going to school and they can't do that anymore. And they get really frustrated and exhausted trying to do it all. And then they lose the joy of meditation. It becomes a chore. So if we can learn a variety, so this book will investigate over 14 different methods of meditation from across the globe. And it's a step-by-step how to do each one from start to finish. And then it goes, the next step is to take it beyond, like you take yoga off the mat, you take meditation out of the chair, you take it out of the sitting, you take the concept of meditation and how do you apply that in your daily life? So each meditation technique has processes that we can apply to our daily living and how we make our choices and decisions. So we take the meditation out of the sitting into what I call meditation in action. So it has that, and it also has real life stories of people who've tried it, got frustrated, what worked, what didn't work. It's real stories from real people's lives of how meditation has worked or not worked in their life.
Yeah, that's really really beautiful. I think just to touch on a couple of things that you said, you indicated it's important not to get too attached or too dogmatic in our approach. Yes. And to really be willing to shift. Sometimes we're gripping, we're holding on.
Yes.
So I love that, because especially if we're meditating and there's a spiritual tradition that we're meditating in. I mean, meditation obviously can be secular as well. It is sometimes challenging to realize that, well, it's time to, you're inviting exploration. So I really appreciate that. And
it's really exciting and invigorating to try something new that's like, maybe you always drink apple juice. Well, try pineapple juice or try mango. Suddenly everyone's liking mango. Well, when I was young, we didn't even know what mango was. Well, what if I had never tried it because I really liked apple juice and I always stuck with it? Then there's a whole plethora of things that are options that could take me further or bring more joy and zest to life. And meditation's the same way. Meditation also takes consistency, dedication, regular practice. It isn't just the technique, it's utilizing it regularly, daily, with a commitment, not judging yourself, just being willing to believe in yourself and keep trying until you develop a skill. Meditation is a skill, just like learning to play tennis or singing professionally. You practice, and you practice in the right way. You learn what works, you learn what doesn't work. It's really very simple. The hard thing, though, is that you have thoughts.
Too bad.
They just show up.
Right. Yeah. That's, well, I love the fact that the meditation in action that you bring into the book, that it's kind of like you said, yoga on the mat and yoga off the mat. If we're practicing and focused on compassion in our meditation practice. How can we, it's not about meditating and becoming, it is about creating that inner peace, but we really want to bring that out into the world in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You just summed it up.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's easier said than done.
Yes.
And, you also describe in the book that, knowledge for the sake of knowledge is just, it's kind of like an empty bowl, or it's just, I shouldn't say that, because an empty bowl can be very profound, actually. But it's just an empty vessel. And it's like, how do we actually, and is that just part of the practice that we bring it out into the world? Does a teacher help with that? How do we really become our meditation practice?
So one of the things is when we meditate, if and when, and we will, if you consistently practice, you reach a point where you feel a calmness within yourself, a calmness about life. You aren't concerned anymore about the outer world. You're sitting in a quiet space where you feel really complete. That's the truth. That is who we really are. So all of the outside world is a drama that we participate with, but who we are is the one who's the observer of the drama. In the meditation practice, we can continue to be the observer of the drama, see it for what it is, and we can participate without getting emotionally charged and attached to the outcomes of all the drama. We can be an observer instead of a participant. Doesn't mean that we aren't active in life and doing things in life, but let me give you an example. If I am in meditation and I'm feeling very patient and calm, and I come out of it, and then I get in my car and I'm driving somewhere, and someone cuts off in front of me on the freeway. Mm-hmm. Now I can practice that calm, peaceful state of being that I was in my meditation, and just let it flow around me. Let them just go right on and do their thing, and not get involved in the drama, and just observe it in front of me. Or I can come out of my observation mode into the participant mode and the reactive. I guess reactive would be a better way to say it. A reactive mode to where, I'm going to react to that. They don't have a right to cut me off. They're not driving right, or whatever I want to say. Or I'm going to go faster so people don't do that. Or, oh dear, people are getting mad at me. I'm going to drive over in the right-hand lane and go real slow. Careful. There's so many ways we can react to the outer world events. But if we bring out the meditation state of serenity and calm, we just observe, and then we decide, do I want to go faster? Do I want to pull over? Do I want to just let them drive by? We don't try to manage the universe. We just try to manage ourselves and the way we're perceiving and responding to what's going on around us. So in meditation, when you're focused on you have a focus usually. Let's say we'll use that you're focused on breath. So you're observing your breath, and then your mind begins to engage, and you think about what happened yesterday, and you remember something that was really wonderful, and you start going down memory lane, and you travel for a while down memory lane, and then you go, oh I'm meditating. And then you come back to your focus.
Right.
And so you go in and out of focus.
Right.
And that's to be expected.
Sure.
That's just to be expected. There's ways to handle it, and I talk about that in the book. But the most valuable thing for you is to realize that, hey, I can be this observer of myself, whether I'm in focus or out of focus. So let's say today I want to practice compassion. You brought that up. That's a marvelous thing to practice. But today I'm going to practice compassion. So when I'm going about my day, my focus is compassion. So if I find myself doing something that's taking me away from compassion, I just become aware of it, just like I would in meditation, and I bring my focus back to compassion. See what I'm saying? You take the focus, you go out of focus, you bring it intentionally back to focus in meditation. You do the same thing during the day. Mm-hmm. So when I was in my 40s, I was working on different virtues, and I was meditating regularly, and I decided that my focus in life was going to be on fearlessness. That's one of the virtues in the Bhagavad Gita. It's the first one listed in chapter 16. And so I was practicing fearlessness. Well, now we know that if you practice focusing on something, it's going to show up.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. What you focus on expands.
Absolutely. The Hawthorne effect. What you focus on, therefore you expand. If I'm focusing on fearlessness, then suddenly I'm going to see a lot of opportunities to be fearful.
Oh, absolutely. You'll really be challenged now.
Yeah. In fact, when I said I was going to focus on that, my husband said, "Are you sure you want to?"
Yeah. That's a tough one. That's a tough one, no doubt.
And I found, so whenever I would start to, like, for instance, I had my own business at the time. I had a human resource consulting business. And at that particular time, I had a client I needed to call. And when I made that phone call, I was going to get a yes or a no to a very important course I was going to teach his company. He was going to say, yes, we'll do it. Or he was going to say, no, we're not going to do it, or we're not going to do it now.
Right.
I wanted that money. I needed that money. We were in a situation where I really needed that money.
Sure. You really wanted this client. So the stakes were big.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I was very, very fearful to make that phone call.
Of course.
So, but then I remembered I actually have whatever I'm practicing, I have on a 3x5 card, and I carry it around with me, or it's in my pocket. So I remembered fearlessness. And so if I'm going to practice fearlessness, then I need to make the call.
Sure.
So I make the call. And that particular situation, we did it, but we were going to delay it. So we had to delay it, but we did it.
Okay.
But I realized I was fearful to make certain phone calls, that I was attached to the outcome.
Yeah.
I was fearful to wear a certain outfit because somebody might not like it. There's so many ways that I was fearful, in little subtle ways that I didn't realize. So that's what we do. I worked with that. So what I did, when I would get distracted by my fears, I would bring my focus back to fearlessness. That's how you put meditation in action. You take the principle that you learned in meditation and you apply it in everyday life. Hence?
Oh, yes. And I think it, in some ways, it equates to when we're sitting in meditation, if we're really using the breath as our focus, which is kind of where we start. It's similar to when our mind wanders, we bring it back to the breath.
Absolutely.
So if we're practicing, whatever tradition we're practicing in, if we're practicing an observance or whatever it might be, or a certain principle like fearlessness, we're inevitably going to go away, just like our thoughts will go away in our meditation or distract from the focus and the focal point. But if we can, in our the expanded awareness, if we can actually bring it back and say, okay, that's really wonderful. So I think that practical way of thinking about meditation is very important. I know meditation has, it's frequently confused with contemplation, or I think there was another word you used as well, which is escaping me. But you talk about, and I don't want to say confused, but it's used interchangeably sometimes with contemplation and other words as well. But you refer to the term, I believe it's superconscious meditation. Could you speak to that and what exactly that is, and how that, I'm going to take a leap here and use the term expanded awareness, really carries into our lives?
Yes. So superconscious meditation is when you meditate consistently to where you can have a quiet mind, and a quiet mind sufficiently long enough to be empty of thought or attachment or concepts. And you simply sit in a quiet place that's empty and simply holds potential. It's difficult to describe unless you've been in that space. But it's a place where you're free, you're liberated, everything is just fine. You feel very comfortable, very confident. You feel nurtured, secure. It's a safe, very safe, content place. And that is in your awareness, in your mind. And if you go there consistently enough, then you begin to perceive your life differently. You begin to know that that is the true state of being, and anything that you choose to do that is not aligned with that will pull you out of harmony.
Mm-hmm.
So you begin to make your choices and actions to be more aligned with that. And this naturally causes us to be more patient, more considerate, more compassionate. We can practice these qualities purposefully. When we meditate consistently, we reach a place where that is natural, and anything that is not that needs to be adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be judged, but to be adjusted. And so we begin to seek that out in ourselves. And another thing is, when we feel that, we recognize that it's oneness. Everything is all together perfect. And that the other beings around us, whether animal, or insect or plant or human being, that they have that within their essence of their core of being. That's what they are also. And so we can begin to think of that when we're talking to them. So when we're talking to someone, instead of talking to their personality, we can be talking to who they are, but we are in our imagination and in our consciousness perceiving them as a fully complete soul being.
Mm-hmm.
And that they have within them goodness and potential and opportunity and options and gifts. And when we look at them, even if we're not verbally saying those things aloud, when we look at them that way, there is an energetic exchange that reinforces that.
Mm.
So you will find that as you consistently do that, you will have relationships will be deeper. They'll be more trusting with others. But going back to superconscious meditation, it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen very often. It's just something to know that will happen. And when it happens, you recognize it and you go, oh, that's what that was. Most of the time in meditation, we have a busy mind, or we're observing phenomenon, or phenomenon being we may see lights or have feelings or whatever in meditation. But meditation process itself is simply actions that we take to bring us to that state of quiet calm, which is called superconsciousness.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the superconscious state of being, you are beyond your mind and you are beyond your subconscious. You are in a space that transcends the physical.
Mm.
And however someone wants to define that, whether you're tuned into the quantum field, whether you are
right
with a divine being, whatever someone wants to define that as is up to them. It's just know that that is possible. Mm-hmm. In that place, you are in tune with the perfection that you can be. And the more you connect with that, it's like plugging into that source regularly, the more you are in tune with that and the more it can support you. I think of meditation as plugging into my power source every day.
Like recharging.
Mm-hmm. And if I don't do it, then there's static, there's diffusion, there's energetic confusion and chaos around me. But if I plug in regularly, it tunes it up. It keeps me, it's like listening to a radio. You've heard this analogy.
Mm-hmm.
If you listen to the radio, the old kind, you would tune it in and you would tune it so there was no static and you could get the most pure connection possible. Regular meditation brings you to that. It tunes you in, fine-tunes you to where you tune in more readily and more easily each time you sit down, until that then you begin to feel that it actually shifts your vibration. Vibration higher and more expanded. The frequency of your electromagnetic field begins to rise, and it affects everything around you, and it affects your mind and your body in a very positive, empowering way. Yeah,
no, that's really beautiful. I know I had some other things about, let's see what, if I want, I know there were other things regarding, I love some of the quotes in the book. One of them was meditation because some questions can't be answered by Google. That was great. Maybe Siri or Alexa.
Right.
They probably have an answer.
We have so many questions about life and we don't know the answers, and in a quiet mind, you can tune into some answers, your own wisdom, your own intuition.
Or perhaps you can actually find new questions, discover new questions.
Absolutely.
Which is even more exciting than finding answers, you know.
That's right.
You talk about with meditation it being a practice, and that often beginners will start out, they're very enthusiastic, but they frequently will give up because they're not seeing results.
Yes.
And this particular book that will be published shortly of yours, you indicate that this is a guide to help those individuals persist.
Yes.
So how, if I'm a new meditator, and, I've tried it, I've given up many times, I'm too busy. How do I actually persist? What in your book is really going to call to me so that, I'm going to persist? Or what other tools can I use to persist?
What I find is there's so many reasons to answer your question. You may have to cut me off. I'll try not to take the whole time doing that.
No, absolutely. No, I won't cut you off. No doubt. No.
I've taught meditation for over 45 years, and there's so many people I have met that say, oh, I need to learn meditation again. I learned it back when, but I have kids now, or I've worked full time now, or it just didn't work for me. All I did was sit there and think. It brought up all these issues I didn't want to look at. I mean, these are some of the things that you hear from people, and so they avoid it or they just give it up. Well, it's like any new skill. The moment you try something new that's going to expand your awareness, it's going to be uncomfortable. You can't expand your comfort zone into a new way of being without feeling some discomfort. It's like shedding its old skin, and then you have to grow the new skin. So if you are meditating and you've given up, chances are you run into the frustration. First, enthusiastic, we're excited, we want to do it. Then we sit down and we do it. But we have like 17 things we're supposed to think of to do it properly. And that's just too much. I just want to sit down and rest. I don't want to work at it like this. So that's one issue. So another one is, okay, I do it, but all I do is think. And I hear this consistently. I sit down to meditate, and even if it's only 10 minutes when I'm finished, I've just thought the whole time. I remembered I was meditating maybe 2 or 3 times, and I went back to my focus, and then I was thinking again. So it's not doing any good, and I'm going to quit. So here, it is doing you good. As long as you sit down consistently, at least once a day, preferably twice a day, but at least once a day, and you go through the process that I explain or that your teacher may have explained to you, and you do it, and then you get up and you go about your day. But the key is you need to do it every day, that you can begin to adjust your neurological system around it, your energetic field around it. So if you do it consistently, you will begin to notice difference. I tell people, if you do it once a day for 3 weeks, as you've been taught, you will begin to notice. The difference won't be in your meditation experience itself necessarily, but it will be in how you are responding to your life.
Did you say once a day for 20 minutes?
15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
I teach different things to different people, depending on their ability to focus.
Sure.
Their age, their lifestyle,
Yeah.
Generally at least 10 minutes, preferably 20, at least once a day, preferably twice a day. And then but the second thing, so one thing is people think, and then they think that's not a good meditation. Never, ever judge your meditation. Don't say it was a good one or a bad one. Just say, I did it. I did it. And if you don't judge it, see, we're not to judge ourselves. So if you don't judge it, but you do notice, well, I really wasn't trying very hard. But if you continue trying to focus, you will eventually get it down. You'll develop a skill. The next thing that happens is people get discouraged because they have so many things in their life that seem to distract them time-wise. They don't have time, but there's a way. Time. You can find time, and I, you know, if you have time to take a shower, you have time to chat on the phone with a friend, you have time to text someone, you have time to read your email, you have time to meditate.
Well, I've heard, and maybe you said this in your book, if it's, or the Zen master, somebody said, if you don't have time, that means you need to, now you need to double your meditation or something like that. You know, it's just,
if you're busy to meditate, you need to meditate more.
Right. You need to meditate more, right?
Yeah. Because if you meditate regularly, things begin to kind of smooth out around you. You find you're calmer. You don't get so caught up in drama, so you don't have as many dramatic things going on in your life. If things do happen that are challenging, you don't look at them as threat. You look at them as something to learn from. You just
right.
the way you experience your life. And so,
do you think that that kind of frenetic busyness starts to drop away, where I don't, you know how we tell ourselves, I don't have time? And a lot of that is kind of the low level anxiety that most of us are carrying around based on our modern lives.
that's very true. And I've been teaching this for 45 years, so life has changed a lot in 45 years. The way
Absolutely.
the surrounding the culture and all have changed a lot. What hasn't changed is my commitment to meditate. So I meditated when I had two young children. My husband traveled a lot. We had our own business, and I meditated twice a day. I meditated twice a day when I had a church that I was minister of every Sunday for 7 years. I ran a spiritual center simultaneously for 9 years, and I had a full-time job with our company that we were running, and I had 2 teenagers. I still meditated twice a day.
That's a handful. That's a handful.
It feeds you at a subtle level,
right,
in a way that nothing else can feed you.
Sure.
And it gives you peace of mind and hope. It gives you comfort.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. Well, it's amazing that in terms of your you and I met when you were the director of education at the Ayurvedic Institute I was there in 2010, 2011, and actually lived with you for part of 2012. And I know you did that for about 10 years, working directly with the students and with Dr. Vasant Lad as well. He's a founder of the Institute. But before that, you were a Kriya Yoga or Kriya minister, or you ran a spiritual center, I believe, in Texas? In a metropolitan area in Texas?
Yes. Mm-hmm. While I was simultaneously, we had our own business.
Right. Specifically an HR consulting business? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
In the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex.
Okay. Do you mind me asking how your experience with Kriya Yoga, or maybe you can just explain a little bit to our viewers and listeners about what Kriya Yoga is, and how that came into your life at that time?
I'm going to just back up briefly to start with. I always was really connected with, in my life as a young girl, Christian parents, Christian upbringing, very connected with God, Christ, and that was very much a part of my belief system and very much part of my practice. I prayed. That was very much who I was. So
you grew up in a farm in Kansas, is that correct? Okay. I just read that in your, I don't know if I was aware of that, but I read that in your books, and it factors into your book that, not Spirit Dancer, but your other novel that you wrote, Pathwalker. Yeah. So,
yes. So my faith, a connection with something greater than myself.
Yes.
Has always been a part of my beingness ever since I can remember. But as I've had experiences in life, I've expanded what that is, by explanation of what that might be. And I'm still to this day. So I did everything I knew of and in my life to be a good person, to pray, to be a good mother, a good parent, a good wife, a good employee, I was self-employed most of my life, so self-employed. And and in my health, I jogged every morning and I did my yoga and I was eating right and doing all the things that were right. And I found that every holiday, Christmas time of every year or Thanksgiving, I was sick. I couldn't figure out why. And so one Christmas, I was really sick and my family all left town to go visit with in-laws during that holidays. I was by myself and I sat down and I looked at myself and I thought something is off balance in my life. I
Sure.
don't know what it is. There isn't a reason I should be so sick, other than the fact that I pushed myself too much. But I was not going to do any less in any area of my life than I was because I wanted to do it right. I sat down and I do a circle of life. It's a process that I take my clients through over the years, and where you draw a wheel and there's spokes, and you are in the middle, and then every spoke that goes out to the wheel is a part of your life. So I have my spiritual, my health, my financial, marriage, children, and I had all the different spokes on my wheel. And then I assessed each one to see how I was doing on a scale of 1 to 10. So I was doing pretty good on all of them until I got and I got to spiritual. And I thought, well, I feel happy with my spiritual one, but you know what? I just realized I have worked on every one of those spokes. I've taken classes, I've read books, I have done things to improve myself in every area except spiritual. I just have taken it for granted.
Right, that it didn't deserve quite. It was just going to be there, but it wasn't going to. You weren't pursuing it with the same zest.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So I decided I'm going to. That felt like that was the key to what was going on with me. So I started doing that, and I started seeing books. I started, reading articles, things in the newspaper. Information started coming to me to support that focus. And I had the book Autobiography of a Yogi.
Yeah.
Yogi is the one who really brought Kriya Yoga to America.
Sure, the Yogananda.
Right. Paramahansa Yogananda. And so I had a friend who had told me at least 4 or 5 times to read that book. He said, "You love it." And I'm like, "No, I don't. No, it doesn't interest me. I'm not interested in India and gurus and all that kind of thing."
Sure.
So I went to a bookstore to buy a business book and couldn't find it, but instead, lo and behold, there was Autobiography of a Yogi. And
well, it sounds like the book found you.
As happens to many people. I'm not the only one. This happens to a lot of us.
Yes. Yeah.
You could probably tell me similar stories.
No, but I love that story, though. I think that's beautiful.
So I read it and I cried because it felt familiar to me. It
Sure.
felt very familiar. Not just that I agreed with it, but it felt familiar. So I started looking for someone who could help me learn more. And that's when I found someone who could teach Kriya Yoga, Roy Eugene Davis. He was a direct disciple of Yogananda's. And Ron, at the same time, my husband took another route through, but it led him to Kriya Yoga as well. So obviously we were both supposed to practice. And so we began learning it and studying it. And our particular teacher really emphasized that it isn't just what you know, but that you practice it. So it wasn't like, what do you know about the Bhagavad Gita or the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali or the Holy Bible or anything that you read? It isn't what you know that you can quote and be tested on maybe and see if you all know the verses and what they say. But are you doing it? Are you living it? Are you practicing every day of your life, every moment of your life? So that was his focus. So we loved it. And by the way, he's the one that introduced us to Ayurveda.
Okay. Yeah. I assume you came through Ayurveda through your introduction to Kriya Yoga, but I wasn't completely sure. Okay.
And met Mark Halpern, David Frawley, many of the people that we know about Ayurveda there.
Okay.
Davis's organization. So
and he was located in Texas?
Eugene? Roy Eugene Davis's center is in Georgia.
Oh, Georgia. Okay.
Georgia. Yeah. So he's no longer with us. He made
sure.
But we began studying with him and learning. And then at some point I was ordained and then my husband was ordained and we became ministers in the tradition and began really sincerely focused on teaching it to the community and bringing it out. Our focus was Kriya Yoga, the way our teacher taught it, respects all traditions. It doesn't say we're the only way and do it this way, or you don't have the answers that you should have. You need to do it this way. He taught, this is for those who are aligned with this and are attracted to this, and this helps them. This is a way. This is a way. But there's other ways too. And so he honored all authentic traditions. Mm-hmm. And so we studied all the other traditions. We studied the teachings of Lao Tzu and Buddha, and I studied with a Native American Indian medicine man for a period of time. So greatly expanded my pursuit. And I always felt like I was following the Kriya Yoga path, because Kriya Yoga means union of body, mind, and spirit. Mm-hmm. When we speak of yoga in the United States and many Western countries, when we say yoga, people think of Hatha yoga, which is
the asanas. Yeah.
So that is yoga, meaning bringing together the body, mind, and spirit. If you do asanas, if you do yoga, physical exercise, or you do pranayama, which is breathing exercises, whether it's in any culture or any language, if you do these things, it helps your body be prepared for better meditation. Mm. This is one of the things in my meditation book that I talk about, is you really cannot have a successful meditation experience or practice unless you do some of the preliminaries to prepare your body and mind to be quiet and calm to support you in doing so.
Yeah, that was, I remember looking at that. You said you need adequate preparation. And if you were to, what do you consider some of the things to bring you to that point of adequate preparation?
I'm going to answer that question. There's Sure. one more thing I want to go back to.
Yeah, I want to continue with the Kriya Yoga. I think that's important.
Kriya means action. It comes from the root word as karma. As karma. So it's action, taking action. And so you can do action many ways. You can do it through worship. You can do it through ritual. You can do it through good works. You can do it through prayer. You can do it through dance. There's many ways that you can do good action. But Kriya Yoga particularly means putting your practices into action. Okay. Now you can learn Kriya Yoga from different teachers, and it can be profoundly different in the way it's presented. So I just want to be clear that this is my understanding of Kriya Yoga, and this is the way I have always presented it. But there are other traditions, other lineages that spin off from Yogananda or from Yogananda's gurus, which would present it a little bit differently. And in 1996, I was at the United Nations Peacekeeping Conference of World Religious Leaders, and there I met the Acharya, who was the highest representative of Kriya Yoga from India. And he lives in Himalayas, and he came over to this peacekeeping conference. And I had the honor of meeting with him and spending some time with him.
Wow.
And he honored, he honored Yogananda's teachings and the teachings of all the different traditions. Yet he's kind of at the apex of the teachings. Bottom line is, he says, live these things, and do anything that you can to raise your vibration. He worked a lot with joy. Having joy, just find joy, laugh, find the joy in life. And that really resonated with me.
Yeah, that's we're far too serious.
Yeah, have a little bit of fun, cut up, be goofy, laugh and snort, whatever it takes.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's amazing. That's an amazing trajectory that your life has, how your life has unfolded. So, and this spiritual center that you established in Texas, was that related to Kriya Yoga, or was it something else?
It was interesting. I did two things at the same time. I was minister of a New Thought church.
Okay.
And I was also, and then the same building, we had our Kriya Yoga Center.
I see. Okay.
We shared the facilities, and many of them were the same people that came to the Sunday morning service, and we had our Kriya, but our Kriya practice there at that time, there weren't a lot of people teaching meditation or teaching these traditions.
Sure.
It was mostly Christian, and rightly so. But
Mhm.
there were very few people teaching from other traditions. So, and there was some Native American Indian there as well, and some. But as we became, my husband and I participated with a group of multi-faith. It's called a multi-faith group organization, housed out of Thanksgiving Square in Dallas, and it was people of all faiths. So we all came together, and once a month we would visit somebody's place of worship, just to experience the authentic experience. So we went to Islamic, we went to Native American Indian, we went to Catholic, we went into the different traditions, and to practice with their people and see what that experience was like. What they did they chanted, did they bow, did they dance, whatever they did, we participated with them. And the purpose of that was to honor and to recognize that we all came from the same values and ethics. Beneath all the dogma and doctrine were some basic truths that we all had, such as compassion and service and these charity, non-harmfulness, these things. So it was a marvelous experience to do that. And so our center was part of that. Those people visited our center as well as other people. And there was a couple of seminaries there locally that I taught their students, their ministers, meditation, so that they would know how to take it out to their congregations. Yeah, so we were involved in the community in that way. So we not only had our center, but we participated with the community as well.
So from Texas, I know that thank you for sharing, a little bit about that chapter of your life, which I'm sure was quite busy, but also very fulfilling. Yeah, very rewarding. It sounds amazing. And I know that you spent over 10 years in New Mexico with, what prompted you to, you and your husband, your family, to go to the Ayurvedic Institute or to come to New Mexico? I mean, how were you guided in that transition of your life?
I think we had our own human resource company, had been very successful, met a lot of wonderful people, and excuse me.
Sure, no problem.
Gonna do that, I forgot. So we decided that we were ready for a change. We felt like we had grown and learned and expanded as much as we could with our current careers. Our daughters were both married. Our last one got married on the summer of June of 2000. And we just felt ready for a new chapter of life. And people thought we were crazy. We had a spiritual center. We had a successful business. We had a home that we had built. We had a whole community we had been involved with. We had it made, and we let it all go. Because those are worldly things, and we just felt called to something next. What's next? And what's next for us, what called to us was Ayurveda. Ayurveda it comes from ancient India, and it teaches a lifestyle that's very supportive of personal and spiritual expansion. And Dr. Ladd was this amazing soul who was willing to bring those concepts into a Western world and teach students how to teach these possibilities of health and lifestyle to a Western culture who needed to learn to eat differently, think differently. And part of what they taught at the meditation was meditation at the Institute. Dr. Ladd was a big believer in meditation. And we had followed his teachings. We'd read his books. We were on our own practicing Ayurveda from what we had learned from his books, as well as some seminars we had gone to by Svoboda and other Frawley and other people. And we just felt called to go there. So Ron wanted to study it and become a practitioner, which was radically different. He had been in the business world.
Right. Yeah. That's quite a shift.
Like a lot of us. You
yes.
too.
Yeah, I did that as well. Yeah.
You did that as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of people.
I studied it. I won't say I became a practitioner, but I did study.
Well, Ron ended up not becoming a practitioner because he studied and then he had the opportunity to work there.
He was teaching there, right? For what was he teaching, or he was? I forget what he was doing exactly.
He had just completed the program. He completed the program in 2001 and a part-time employee while he was a student. And then they had a position open up where they needed someone, and he was perfect for it. So he was
Okay.
for that position.
Right. Okay.
And he was there for 10 years. And after he was
Okay.
there for about, I don't know, 8 months or 9 months or so, a position opened up and I applied for it and I was presented.
Okay.
Truth be known, before we ever went to Texas, we felt that it was calling to us to work with the Institute and with Dr. Ladd. We felt called to do that.
Yeah.
We didn't think anybody, we just went.
You mean before you moved to New Mexico, that you felt you had a sense that you were going to be working with Dr. Ladd? Okay.
Yeah, we felt like we would be serving divine, serving spiritual, serving the expansion of all of us. That's what we had done for years in our career. When we taught people, we brought concepts into the business world, that the spiritual concepts, not using spiritual terms, but team building and support and empowerment. We were bringing that into all that we taught. So the spirituality was our way of life, but it might have been hidden a little bit by business terms, so forth.
Sure. And actually, some of that might be more acceptable today than it was at the time that, you were engaged in HR and consulting. But that's really fascinating, because you were really bringing, it's kind of like the, yoga on the mat and yoga off the mat. Or meditation on the cushion and meditation in action. You were bringing what you were cultivating in your own inner life to your business clients and your business career.
We had worked for other people. I had always been an independent consultant. I was with Dale Carnegie training for 8 years, and then we went into our own business. But when we were with our own business, we founded it on the mission of it being spiritual in all practices. We did not bring it religion or spirituality into our classes, but it was the foundation of it, and that showed in it. And we were blessed. It seemed to people wanted it. People were hungry for it, and it did very well. And so when we came to the Ayurvedic Institute, likewise, it was to serve. It was to serve, and I felt. I had a vision before I went, a vision that I would be reconnecting with many of my soul friends. Without going to a lot of detail unless you want it, but I had a vision that I had helped. There were the souls that I had helped and that had helped me to this point in life. And then there was a long line of people ahead of me that I was going to learn from, and they were going to learn from me. It was reconnecting. And so I also had another vision that I was going to go to India, and I was going to spend time in India and in the mountains. I was going to be with India, and I was going to be in the mountains. And this is about 2 years before we moved to Albuquerque. So I puzzled over that because I didn't have any intention. I'd never had the desire to live in India or to travel to India, even though I was practicing meditation and all that had come from there. But I wasn't attached to India. I was more attached to meditation and
the principles. Yeah.
And we were living in Texas, and there weren't any mountains around there.
Yeah, it's kind of not a lot of mountain ranges. Yeah.
No, and I couldn't perceive of what that was going to be. And then this showed up. All of a sudden, we were going to go to Albuquerque, and I was going to be working with someone from India and a lot of people from India, and people who were, there was the India aspect, and there were mountains in Albuquerque.
Of course, the Sandus Mountain, they were called, Sandus Mountains. Yeah, beautiful mountains.
And I met with sometime later, I met with a master from India, and I told him that story, and he said, oh yes, he said, this time you weren't to go to India. India was going to find you.
Oh, isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? I love that. I love that. Well, I think you also, bring up, not to go too far out, but I think what your story reveals to an extent is, um, through the clarity that you've developed in meditation practice, it does really sharpen. We all have the capacity for
Yes,
deep intuition.
yes, yes,
And I'm not going to say to see the future, but to intuit very strongly where we're supposed to, what's next,
yes,
what will unfold. And sometimes we'll get a very strong desire to do something, which isn't necessarily, I mean, maybe you can comment on this, but I think if our mind isn't clear, that strong desire isn't necessarily for our benefit and for the benefit of others. But
well,
when our mind is clear, even if that desire doesn't make sense necessarily,
yes, absolutely.
like what you described, you were puzzled about this. You didn't try to combat it, but you were just puzzled. So, but and it often doesn't show up right away, and in most of the time, does not show up in the way that we imagine.
That is so true. Spot on there. That is so true.
And when it does show up, I find that in my own life, sometimes I don't recognize it immediately.
Yes, it's very true. And then suddenly you go, oh, there it is.
And then
Interpreting it.
yeah, and then there's that moment of deep understanding, and perhaps that maybe that could also be called insight.
Insight, intuition, inner wisdom. You know, I love how you said it. We all have these abilities. We all can have intuition, insight, understanding. It just comes to different people different ways.
Yeah.
And it tends to show up when you need it. You know, if you're open and you're observant, it'll show up. Things find us, right? I mean, if we're open to it and we're willing to be the most that we can be and be of service and seek out the highest and best for ourselves, if we're open to that, things find us, and that's surprising. You're right about that.
Yeah. It can be quite funny when it does
That's
occur,
that joy.
but very joyful, and it's I mean, it's the element of surprise as well in life that keeps things fresh.
Yes, absolutely.
But so you're 10 years at the Ayurvedic Institute. That's quite a long time. And it's hard to describe that experience, I'm sure, but how was it different from what you imagined it would be?
I really saw at that point in my life, I think I had learned to not have expectations, but just to trust that it was there. I trusted Dr. Ladd. I trusted his heart and his school had a good reputation. I trusted Ayurveda. And I trusted that I had always been supported when I was following my insight. And if I followed it, that I would be supported. It felt like it fit like a glove. It was like, okay, this fits. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Part of it too was I was in my 50s and I was at the age where I knew myself, and I had some strong learning curves, and I felt confident that I could feel my way through situations. And I learned a lot in my previous life that prepared me. I think wherever we are going next, we can look at where we are now and where we've been, and we can see how we've been trained and prepared for what's coming next. That in the Yoga Sutras, potential.
Yeah. Well, that's maybe that's the reverse of the the clarity and seeing forward, and then actually seeing, oh, that's why, it's true. I have found that in my life as well, that many times I didn't realize what I was being prepared for.
Yes.
And how this particular aspect will be useful in the future.
Yes, exactly.
You know, so of course, with your prior business experience, business career, and consulting, and the combination of that along with your spiritual centers, I use that, you know, you would be uniquely suited for coming to the Ayurvedic Institute and being of maximum service there. So
That's so true. I think, and I had learned fire ceremony. That had come to me. I had that was another practice that I had, also regular practice, and that was something that just fit.
Yeah, that you actually have a book. I'm gonna just look at the title. It's Agnihotra, Haven on Earth, and a simple and comprehensive guide to the practice of Agnihotra, a Vedic fire ceremony for personal and planetary transformation. Also on Amazon.
Yes.
Could you speak to that, and you know how that has been significant in your life, how you discovered it, and in particular this book and how this came to fruition?
Thank you. Sure. It found me. I always feel like meditation found me.
Mm-hmm.
First heard about it and we practiced it. I feel like it found me, and I feel like fire ceremony found me. I read a book called Secrets of the Soil by Christopher Bird and somebody else whose name escapes me at the moment. They wrote that book, and they also wrote a book called The Secret Life of Plants, both marvelous books. And I read Secrets of the Soil, and in that book, there were numerous chapters, and I just kind of picked whatever chapters I wanted to read in that book, and I read it, and I had it around for a number of years, and then I gave it away like I have a lot of books.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to when I was at that 1996 conference for the United Nations for the world religious leaders, and I met the Acharya from India. He invited myself and Ron, my husband, to go down to Houston and to attend a blessing he was doing at a home for a community. It was a community blessing, and he invited us to come and be part of it. And so we were excited, and we went down there. And it was a fire ceremony, and I had never seen one before. And he was very, you know, he had the yellow saffron robes, and he had the markings on his forehead and the staff, and he wore the wooden shoes that had a nail that went with his toes around, and he was the real yogi guy.
Yeah. He wouldn't fit in on the prairie in Kansas, in other words.
No.
Okay. All right.
But he was marvelous, because I always spent time with him. I thought he was wonderful, and he had really awesome energy, really good soul. So we went, and he did this fire ceremony, and he started this chanting and the fire, and I smelled the fire, and I started crying. Tears were just rolling down my cheeks. And Ron was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." Again, I felt like it was familiar. Very familiar to me, and it felt like I'd come home for some strange reason. So after the whole thing, I experienced this, and I told him, and he said, "You are to learn this. You do this, and you teach this. You learn it, and you teach this." And I'm like, "Okay, yes, sir." So,
right. Okay. So you were given a directive or something that felt like one.
Yes, and so. But I was happy to, because I felt like I wanted to, but I was a Western woman, and I wasn't familiar with these traditions and this way at all. And I didn't think I thought it might not be considered appropriate, or, you know, maybe I wasn't qualified. And he said, "Do this." And I'm like, "Okay, I have the pat on the back. I can do it." So I said, "Can you teach me?" And he said, "No, I don't teach it. I'm going back to India. I don't teach it. You will find someone to teach you." Okay. Well, it took me a variety of different experiences at different places, asking different people. I started going to ceremonies of friends of ours who were from India, who were Hindu. And I started going to fire ceremonies and to see. And every time I would ask if somebody could teach me, the priest or whoever was doing the fire they were always men, and they said, no, we can't teach you, but you will find someone. So, the strange way the world works, I was asked by a friend of mine to go into a prison system and be a judge for a speak-off of prisoners who had learned to give speeches, and they were going to have a contest, and I was asked to go and be one of the judges.
Okay.
So I go into this prison, and I'm sitting there, and this guy gets up and gives this amazing talk.
Wow.
And he's talking about the book, Secrets of the Soil.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Wow.
And I'm like, that's really strange, because just 5 days before, that book kept coming into my mind when I was meditating for some reason, and I had ordered it again. So he's talking about this book, Secrets of the Soil, and I go home, and the next day this book arrives, Secrets of the Soil, and I open it up, and one of the chapters is all about Agnihotra.
That is amazing. That is amazing. I just want to say that when you say you have your books and then you give them away and then you might buy it later, I do exactly the same thing.
That too?
I do. It's good for the author. I continue to support them over multiple purchases. Yeah, but that is amazing.
So this is how life can work if we really watch and observe. And so I opened it up, and I thought, oh, this is awesome. I can find someone who will teach me. Because the chapter was about someone who did it back in Virginia, and I thought, oh, this is great. Well, it gave the names of the people, but it didn't give them phone and address or anything. So I called the operator. That's when we had operators.
Yes, operator. What's an operator? Wait a minute.
The lady that talks on the phone like this. So
operator, that was the old Google, I guess, right?
Right. So, right, exactly. Asked for this name in Madison, Virginia, and didn't have it. So I thought, okay, so far everything is leading me to this, so I am going to get an answer. A few days later, I was sitting there bored, and I saw the book sitting next to me, and I picked it up and I looked in the back. I never look at the footnotes of a book. I don't look at the resources and all that in the back. And it had in the footnotes, and it had a little bit of information about different chapters, and there it had about the Agnihotra chapter. It had a name and a phone number.
Oh my goodness.
Little tiny footnotes at the very back of a book, which I never read. So I was guided to pick it up, and I did. And I called, and I got this name. His name is Richard Powers. And I said, Richard, I'm a woman. It's the first thing that came out of my mouth.
He must have been.
Do it yet. And I live in Texas, and I would like to learn how to do Agnihotra. Is it possible? And he said, well, of course. Of course. And I said, well, do I need to come there to learn from you? And he said, no, I'll send you the equipment. He said, if you want to buy it, here's how much it costs. And you'll need some cow dung, because it burns cow dung as the fuel. And I'm like, oh, on a farm, I know what that is.
Sure.
I'll send that to you, and then I'll send you instructions. And that's what I got. I got a package with some cow dung, dry cow dung, and the kit, and a little trifold brochure that had 5 steps to take to do a fire ceremony.
Okay.
I took it and I followed those 5 steps, and now I have the book. And
yeah, it's a beautiful. Yeah, I have my book as well. It's ticked off there, so we have matching books.
A little bit more than 5 steps.
Yes.
But I tell you, I only had to call him twice. I just was confident to mess around with it.
Yeah, you were willing to be in the discomfort zone until it felt. Yeah.
Absolutely. New skill, had to be uncomfortable running. So I did it, and I've committed to do it for 3 months, every morning and every evening, consistently, to test it, because I wanted to see if this really worked.
You were doing an experiment.
I was practicing.
And what were you hoping was going to work?
I wanted to see the results of it healing the environment. We had a really great home and a great yard and everything, but it talked about how it helped heal. It heals. It brings everything in the environment when that fire is burning, returns to its originally harmonious, perfect nature. So let's say that I am ill and I have a distress in my body or in my mind. Once I'm sitting down to do this fire ceremony, for the period of time that that fire burns, my mind is calm, my mind is quiet, and everything turns to its original vibration. And then when the fire dies out and the vibration slowly changes back to the norm of your place, then you go back to your erratic or chaotic or whatever it is environment. But the more you do it, the more you begin to stabilize your environment as being harmonious. So I decided, okay, I didn't feel we had any problems, but I thought I would try it.
Sure.
I did it for 3 months, and I started experimenting with the ash and observing things around me, and miracles were happening. And I was convinced. I just knew. I totally trusted it. So we had our center at the time, so I started teaching it to people at our center.
Okay.
Some of them started practicing it.
At the spiritual center?
The spiritual center.
Okay.
That we had at the time. And then when we moved, I took it to the Ayurvedic Institute. Dr. Lab it, and he taught it, but he was very kind to allow me to teach the students as well. And I taught it to students there, and their students, people came from, as you know, at the Ayurvedic Institute, people came for seminars from all over the world.
Sure.
And I taught Agnihotra to some of them, and there's people that are doing it in Germany and Switzerland and some of the islands, and all over the world. There's people that learned it from me when they came to the Institute.
Yeah.
Continue to teach it. And so when I was teaching it, I did handouts. And so somebody said, well, could you, and I was handing out packets of handouts, and somebody said, well, there's a book. And I'm like, well, yeah. So I put it together in book form with photos and everything, and very detailed. And again, I write handbooks, and I'm writing the one on meditation now. Well, the one on Agnihotra is very detailed, frequently asked questions, the frustrations and problems you'll run into, how to stick with it.
Yeah.
And a full chapter on all the beneficial things that I've seen and other people reported happening as a result of the practice.
Sure. I think actually, thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience regarding this beautiful practice. You mentioned two words that I think are important, healing and harmony. And actually there's a third word too, restoring. Any particular examples, or, maybe on a less detailed scale, how you think Agnihotra promotes healing and harmony and restoring balance to our environment?
If you have a yard that has a garden that has imbalance with its insects, or too much of one thing, too little of something else, if you were to do Agnihotra regularly, the garden would begin to balance itself. The insects would find a way to balance themselves rather than you having to use herbicides and pesticides.
Okay.
If you have, we had a tree that it was being damaged by insects, and we did Agnihotra regularly, and I put ash on the insect holes. It was borers, and where the borer would be, and I put ash around that, and I sprayed water and ash on the trunk of it. When the tree was going into the autumn and leaves all fell, a third of the branches were dead. And so we were out in the spring, and I did all this process with the Agnihotra ash before the winter came, and in the spring that branch was enlivened, and it wasn't dead after all. It came back out, and that branch in the tree was whole again. So, you could say, well, maybe it wasn't really dying, you just thought it was, but I grew up on a farm. We had crops. I know when something's dying. It was dying. It was in the process of dying to a degree you couldn't bring it back, and it did come back. What Agnihotra does and the ash does helps heal things. so we saw this kind of thing happen consistently. We had a neighbor who had severe depression that his depression went away. And the doctor said he couldn't figure out what was going on. And the neighbor lady said, I know what it was. I know what it was. It was your fire ceremonies. Now, I can't prove any of this.
No.
But when you see the same thing happen over and over and over again, there must have been 20 different things that happened over the winter when I first did it that demonstrated to all of us that something was going on that had not happened before.
Mm-hmm.
There's many stories from multiple people that these things can happen. You have to be careful with something, though, that's about healing, because people can also attribute things to it that aren't so. People can want it. They can project things onto it that aren't really happening. So I'm very careful when I talk about this.
That's where the disclaimer comes in.
Yeah.
Of course. You don't want to give people a false impression.
I have known, people have told me that they couldn't walk and they sat in an Agnihotra and they could walk. Cured their cancer. I can't disagree. I went to
no, but you're not going to it's like this isn't no guarantees that, but it's
and if you believe something,
it's an exploration. And I know we have your book, which is a wonderful handbook. Are there other resources out there, either Facebook groups or things that you have tapped into with regard to Agnihotra that people who want to delve more deeply into this ancient practice, are there things out there that you would recommend?
There are, you can just Google it and you'll have information about it.
Yeah.
In my book, I do have resources.
Okay. Right.
I also have on my website.
Your website as well.
I also have a second website, cosmicgathering.com.
Mm-hmm.
That has a lot about fire ceremony, Agnihotra, a lot of answers to questions, and it also has resources.
Okay.
I also have a YouTube channel where I have some channels.
Okay, I didn't know you had YouTube, so I'll include both your websites in my show notes as well. Let me make a note of that you do have a YouTube channel. Wonderful. Well, I know that with the Agnihotra, and particularly in your book, and now you talked a lot about it's healing the environment, the what's happening in your home or your yard, and it sounds like it's expanded out in your particular case to the neighboring yard, and I know that from reading both your nonfiction and your fiction writing, you're very aligned and you feel very close to nature, and that the natural world really speaks to you. And this is also one of your books, Edible Weeds in a City Yard. Do you want to tell me, and the subtitle is Don't Weed Your Yard, Munch Your Way Through It. And maybe a book like this, as our world seems, I said seems because everything is a projection to some extent, to maybe to 100% extent, but as our world grows more precarious, and I mean the recent pandemic, I view it in many ways as the pandemic of fear, with the hoarding and the people just grabbing resources, that this, our food source and our food supplies, we saw a lot of that be compromised, especially in the early days of the pandemic. But these edible weeds in the city yard, tell me about that. What, how is that useful today in our modern world, health-wise, resource-wise? Why has that called to you specifically?
I feel like if I have soil, and I can water it, I will have weeds, and the majority of those weeds will be edible. What was edible and how to choose it and how to prepare it. everywhere we've lived has had weeds that were edible. And we've moved 20 some times in our life. So apartments don't necessarily have that. So if you're in an apartment or a townhouse or a condo where you don't have a yard, you wouldn't necessarily have that.
Sure.
But if you have any land at all around you, even a small half or a quarter of your yard, or just a little strip along the side of your house, you can actually buy the seeds for some kind of weeds if you are into that. But we all know about dandelion greens. Everybody, that's the first thing everyone thinks of when they think of edible weeds. But lamb's quarter is edible. Amaranth, wild amaranth is edible. Small sunflowers, when they're first coming up, those leaves are edible. Grass is edible.
Mm-hmm.
Edible if you do it the right way and you know what you're eating. So many things are edible that are out there, and people are just mowing them down, spraying them, killing them. So I'll give you an example. You saw our house in Albuquerque.
Yes. Yep.
In our backyard.
And you had a beautiful yard there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So when I started just watering I grew some kale and some chard and some things that are arugula and things that
Sure.
When I started watering, all these weeds came up that were edible, that I knew were edible. And I realized I don't have to grow a garden. All I have to do is just water the dirt. And I've got weeds galore. So just in that yard in Albuquerque, we had, I think we counted 10 different kinds of edible plants. And so moving to Fort Wayne, it's a different climate. It's a different situation. But here, there's 3 or 4 kinds of wild weeds that like plantain that we didn't have in Albuquerque. So different plants here, but I still have many things that are edible.
Sure.
Go out. In fact, I have last year, we had about 4 lamb's quarter plants, and they grow to be so tall, they can go 6 feet tall, and clear through the summer, you can trim off the little shoots that are coming out, the new branches, and they're edible. So all summer long, I was just going out and we were having lamb quarter in our smoothies, and we were steaming it with butter and garlic, and we were having it with our meals. So all year round, there's things that you can eat. You just have purslane goes a lot of different places, and very high in omegas. Mm-hmm. So if you know what you're doing, and most of them are easy to identify enough that you'd be safe eating them.
Beautiful.
So the book has 11 common weeds that you can eat, and most cities have them, that you could choose and you could eat, and how to prepare them. There's some recipes and all. There's a lot of other books out there on foraging as well.
Of course. When you were a child growing up on a farm, were weeds part of your, what your interaction with nature or your family? I know you spoke of your mother and that she was very much in tune with plants, and so did weeds regularly come to your table?
They did. In fact, we had an oak tree, and beneath it grew lamb's quarter patch, and every year that lamb's quarter would grow in that particular area. And my job as when I was really little, was to go and harvest the lamb's quarter to bring it in for a meal, and Mom would steam it or cook it in different ways, usually butter. But I learned to do that, and she also would take wild violets and dandelions, and she grew nasturtiums so that we could have the nasturtiums in our salads, and so that was not a weed, but it was something that we could eat.
Sure.
And things like that. Poke plants. If you know what you're doing and you know when to pick it and what kind of poke plant, like poke salad is known. There's a song called Poke Salad Annie.
Okay.
60s or 70s. That's very common in the South to eat. So my mom taught us to do these and how to cook them and how to prepare them. And interestingly enough, now I know there are many other weeds that were there that she didn't know were edible that I know were edible, but I didn't learn that till later.
Sure. Okay. Beautiful. Well, that brings me to, you've done a lot of writing, nonfiction, handbooks, your career in education and consulting, and, but you've transitioned. Well, your most recent book on meditation is nonfiction, obviously, but there's a lot of personal. I think what I really liked about it is you also shared your personal experience as well, and the experiences of others. So to me, that made it much more than a handbook. So I just want to say that. I really enjoyed the excerpts that I read from your most recent book that's soon to be published. So I have both copies of your, should I use the word novels or should fiction? Your
novels, sure.
Yeah, your fiction books. And I did have the opportunity to read, and you call these this is a series of books that you have started, and I assume you will continue to work on. Yeah. Quite exciting. So thank you. Really, really, really wonderful. I did have the opportunity you call them the Cave Time Chronicles. I did read book 1, which is titled Pathwalker, A Soul's Journey Through Parallel Lives. But you've also written the second in the series, which you call Spirit Dancer, again, A Soul's Journey Through Parallel Lives. And that's book 2 of the Cave Time Chronicles. So in looking at Pathwalker, just gonna, you bring in, to me, in looking at it, so many different aspects of your own journey.
Yes.
Do you want to tell me what brought you into writing fiction, and how that transpired, and how this has, obviously these are, that your most recent Spirit Dancer is quite a, that's over 500 pages. So that's quite a commitment on your part to produce these. So tell me how that came to be, how these books are, have, how your life has morphed into coming to write these fiction books, and then we can chat a little bit about what's in Pathwalker, because that's one I had the opportunity to read, and how that actually is really pertinent today.
Yes.
Yeah. That was you were seeing something. There's no doubt. So yeah. So I'd love to hear more about how these books were birthed.
I think underneath it all was my whole life as an adult. I mused upon what would it be like if I really lived totally according to spiritual principles. Totally. I mean, willing to just put it out there and not worry about what people thought or what was appropriate or what society wanted.
Is that maybe that's one of the cases where your husband would say to you, "Are you sure?"
Yeah, probably.
You were on a motorcycle trip?
And a story began unfolding in my mind, and I was the main character. And as I was walking down the path, things began to happen. And a series of scenes showed up sequentially. And I just watched it like a movie. And when we got somewhere that night, I told my husband, I said, I have this whole amazing experience. And he said, well, Ellie, that's a book. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that could be a book. So yeah, okay, I'll write it. I will sit down and I will just take these scenes and I will start writing them out, and then I'll see what happens. So I agreed in my mind, and I talked to him. I said, that's a great idea. When we get home, I'm going to do that. So
is this like starting the practice of meditation and seeing what happens?
I guess so. So we that night we spend the night, and the next morning we're writing back, and another book shows up, and a whole nother series of things began to show up, and I'm like, I was so excited. I just felt I was just buzzing. My whole body was just, something was happening that I didn't have any control over.
Right.
But it was like I was being assigned to do these books. So I took notes over the first 2 books. And as I was taking notes over the second book, a third book showed up. And so I took notes on that. And then a 4th one, and I took notes on that. And then I said, enough, no more, hold on, stop.
It was coming fast and furious. It
was, and I didn't want to stop the flow, but I I was literally, my body was shaking with some kind of something going on. I was shaking. I was so excited and so wired with this. So I asked
Yeah.
for it to stop, and then I focused on the first book. And I said, I wrote the first book. I worked on the first book for probably 4 years, just bits and pieces along with life, still still doing other things. And um, and then periodically I would get more details on the other books. So I was simultaneously sort of fleshing out 4 books.
Okay. All
while I was
right.
primarily focusing on the first book.
So are they chronological or no?
Well, they are. They are. Here's the way I feel they're being downloaded to me, and
Sure.
so I just let them be what they are.
Yeah.
They are sequential in that it's the story of a woman who unexpectedly finds herself in a life where she's there, but she has no clue who she is, what the world is, what the planet is, what her life is. She knows nothing. It's like she just stepped into another life and she has no clue what's going on. And she has to sort it out, figure it out. And she does. And then at the end of that life, she realizes that the same thing that brought her into this life is actually going to take her into another life. And something is happening that's going to carry her into another life. So the book completes one life and begins to taste what the next life might be.
Okay.
And then so the end of one book is really kind of the beginning teaser of the next book. And
I see. Now you use the term parallel lives.
I wrote the book originally, and I had a subtitle of A Woman's Journey Through Reincarnations.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my own observation of what is reincarnation, what does it mean to live in more than one existence, and then listening to science come out with the concept of quantum fields and string theory and parallel lives and parallel universes and all this, I began looking at it and thinking, it is, maybe we pop in and out of lives. Maybe she has the ability to go in and out of lives, but it's not necessarily sequentially, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
See, these books leave a lot of unanswered questions.
Right.
It's like I'm the heroine and I'm going through what is this and what is that and what does that mean, and so I sort through things in the first book, and then the second book is totally different life, totally different, because every lifetime that she lives has its own lessons and its own experiences for her to expand her understanding of existence.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't all be the same. So every life is going to be drastically different. So each book, her life is drastically different. And so as I write the book, I become that woman, and I think for her, I experience for her, I viscerally become her as I go through the book and write the book. And I become very good friends and very close to the other characters in the book. And to the degree that when I finish the book, I cry because I don't want to leave that world. It's like I'm so much there.
Right. I've heard that and read that with a lot of writers when they're, especially with fiction, that there's and maybe in some ways that's the parallel lives. You can have a parallel life with your work of fiction.
When I write those books, I am on a journey myself.
Right. What from the Pathwalker specifically, what were there surprises there for you that you didn't expect?
The book was, when I write a book, and I think a lot of authors do this when they write intuitively like this, there was many surprises. I would find myself writing something in an early scene, and I would think, why am I writing that? Something would come to me, well, have her do this, and I would have her do it, and I would think, I don't know why she's doing that. And then 6 chapters later, there would be something come up that refers back to what I'd already written 6 chapters earlier. So it was all being tied together like someone was knitting and crocheting.
Sure.
As I went along.
Yeah. So you didn't necessarily, you had some general framework, but you didn't necessarily know exactly where you were going.
Right.
Just like your character, your main character, who is known as Eleni on Earth and Anika on, I think the planet is
Chandra.
Chandra. She didn't necessarily know where she was going.
Correct. I didn't either when I was writing it.
Right. But you also incorporate elements of your own life that
Yes.
have been significant to you, both meditation and the practice of the fire ceremony, the Agnihotra as well.
And chanting.
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 Yeah. And you have, I think her name is Theory. Is that how you pronounce her name? Theory, who's I'll call her the leader, or I was going to say queen of the triads, but maybe that's inappropriate, the leader of the triads. But she's quite a character. She's quite larger than life. She's ferocious. She's ferocious. And, at what point, this is a story on one level. There's multiple layers to the story, obviously, but it's a story of healing our differences with peace and compassion.
Yes.
And caring. And at one point in the book, you talk about six, I'm not describing it, but the practices that we want to bring into daily living that are important for the Sunlanders who embody goodness. But Theory, in some ways in these battles that were this major battle that occurred between the Sunlanders and the Triads, and I think you also have another tribe, the Rainlanders, are they called, or?
Rainlanders. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It seems like some of your insights, or some of the insights that Anika was having during her meditations, fueled some of the methods that were used during these, this very ferocious battle that was occurring between the triads and was specifically on the side of the triads, but the Sunlanders were inhabiting defensive methods as well to, as peaceful as possible.
As peaceful as possible. Yes.
But like you had the bees, and you had the various things, but these were coming to you during the meditations. I say you, but your character Anika. Do you think there's some kind of reality to that, in terms of that I know this is a work of fiction, but do you think that, we sometimes look at a problem and we can't see the answer, and if we're really in touch with what we want to embody during our lives and how we want to project in the world, do you think that we can really find these these solutions that are doing?
Your mind could not think of these things necessarily, but they show up and you recognize the wisdom of them. Yeah. I think I think many people, I don't know about you, but I would assume you, because I know you enough to know that you meditate and all. I think many of us have sought an answer or had a problem that wasn't solved, and an answer shows up unexpectedly. We kind of talked about that earlier. An answer shows up unexpectedly as a perfect solution that you never would have been able to conjure up in your mind. And so I think I feel that these books are very realistic in the way the mind works and the way the heart works, and the way when we hold a space for possibilities can happen. I feel like these books you're right, they're multi-level. You could read them for pure entertainment. You could read them for insight. People have told me that they read the book and then it triggered within them their own insights about things. It seems to be a catalyst for the reader, and I'm hearing this from a variety of people. I feel like there's multi-levels of information coming through these books that even I don't know all of it yet.
Mm. Yeah, that's profound. And have you received feedback from readers that was very different than what you were expecting?
It's interesting to me because some readers will pick up certain aspects of it that pertain to their life right now, but they don't see other things in it because that isn't relevant to their life today. But we've all read a book 3 or 4 times, and the first time we read it, we get one thing out of it, and 5 years
Sure.
later, we get something else. So this book has so much information. I've had 2 or 3 people tell me they're going to need to read it numerous times to get the full the full story of all that's in there for them. I had a woman who had a baby that died 2 days after its birth, and she was heartbroken. And gave her the book, and she read Pathwalker, and suddenly shifted the way she looked at her baby. She looked at her baby as a soul that was infinite, instead of a body and personality that was there 2 days on. She suddenly realized that what she always believed, and her baby had perhaps brought into her awareness, that the baby was a soul, and she would see it again, it would come again, they were not, there was a connection that was powerful that did not need to be physical. And so it gave her peace. And she
gave her, transformed her grief.
This is not anything I would have expected.
Of course. Yeah. Well, the book Pathwalker, in terms of the divisiveness and then the healing that occurs between these, do you call them tribes, or do you call them
clans,
tribes?
Clans or tribes, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Some of them tribes and some of them clans.
Sure. How do you, this is kind of a modern day drama that's happening here. It's being, perhaps it's a drama that's ever occurring in the human plane.
I think it is. Yeah.
How do you see this book in relation to 2020 in terms of what's happening in our contemporary world?
That's a really good question. It seems to me that when we run into something that we don't agree with, or that seems harmful to us, or just seems wrong, it may be necessary to protect ourselves, defend ourselves, so that we aren't harmed by it. At the same time, can we look beyond that and see that all fear, all anger, all attacking comes from deep within a wounded being, a wounded child. And if in the book Pathwalker, Tyree was deeply wounded as a child.
Yes.
She chose certain behaviors to protect herself, and those manifested into being a very militant, aggressive adult woman. But beneath it all was that little wounded child. And if we can be always looking for the opportunity to connect with that child, or that person, the being behind the persona that's being presented to us, there's someone there to have compassion for. So we may not let them rule our life, but at the same time, we can have compassion for the wounded.
Yeah.
And that I've been a counselor for years. And so I've counseled people through all kinds of traumatic events and all kinds of childhood issues.
Sure.
And within all of us, when we act out or we lash out, is wounds. So it's the balance, it's walking that razor's edge of not allowing that to harm us or harm those we love, but at the same time, having compassion and not judging them. They in their own way are doing the only thing they know to do.
Yeah.
They can't think any differently. They cannot logically, their brain can't grasp anything but what they believe in. And beliefs are so strong, and they're usually founded on wounds. often found in our childhood wounds.
Yeah. So,
So
practicing non-judgment.
non-judgment, compassion, and at the same time, setting your boundaries and
Mm-hmm.
standing true to yourself. That place which you have reached in your understanding, stay there confidently and be stalwart about it, but be compassionate at the same time. It's a balancing act, and we can do it. Sometimes it's our intention behind what we do. So we might do something with anger or judgment. That's one outcome. But if we do something because it's necessary, but we have compassion for the other person, that has a different outcome. Our intent
Yes.
is what makes it what it is.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And well, I also saw in this book, and I because it's a series. Is this Netflix the next venue for you?
I've been asked. People said, "When's it going to be a movie? I want to see."
Well, you have all the elements.
I know.
The good and the evil, the drama, the healing, the suspense. So it's really quite a remarkable feat that you've undertaken, and I'm sure it's another path. It's another path in your own self-discovery. There's no doubt.
It is. There's a lot of, what is life? What is existence? Why are we here? What are we doing? How does it work? These are all questions we all have, and these books tease around those a little bit. Well, what would that be? What would that be? Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. So the second book involves it in a totally different way, but same questions.
Right. Well, I know that you've also been encouraged fun and play and playfulness, humor in all aspects of your own life. And how do you continue to carry that and bring that into your daily life in terms of especially when the world seems to be obsessed with very serious things, no doubt, but how do you best embody that or encourage others to do so?
I look at life as a choice to come into this world, into this life, onto this planet, and play around with what's it like, to be an aggressor. What's it like to be somebody who's strong? What's it like to be somebody who's weak? What's it like to be male? What's it like to be female? What's it like to be old? What's it like to be young? Just experiencing an adventure. It's just purely an adventure to try out different things and see what works, what doesn't work, and learn from it. And so if I am coming into this existence to play, then I can try something out and be serious about what I'm doing, but I need to not be attached to it being perfect, to having it be understood. Certainly, when you do a podcast or when I write a book or when anybody presents something out to the public, you have to put it out there.
Absolutely. It's not easy to do.
It's not easy to do. And you don't know what people will think. You don't know what kind of feedback you're going to get. You have to have fun with it. Say, I do this because I enjoy it. I feel good. It expands me. And I know it'll expand some people. And you're saying, well, then just pass it by. Say what you want to say. But I did it because it's fun. It's an adventure. And I want to share it with other people. And
right.
I find most people are willing to play that way. If
yeah.
In that way.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, I adopt the strategy because putting yourself out there means risking vulnerability and and criticism and negative feedback. But in listening to Deepak Chopra, anytime someone criticizes him, he thanks them. Mm-hmm. He says, "Thank you very much." So I just thought, well, that's a wonderful approach.
It is. It's a great.
It's like And if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to thank others for their criticism, even though it can sting at the time, it's easy to just dust yourself off and move on to the next thing.
Don't define yourself by that criticism.
Right. So that's a wonderful way to approach it. Well, Ellie, this is. Do you have any? I will include. This has been a remarkable conversation,
Thank you.
and a real gift for me. So I want to thank you. It's really been
It's been great to connect again.
It has. It's really been a circle. I will include, everything we've talked about in terms of where people can find you in the show notes, but it's elliehadsall.com and cosmicgatherings.com, as well as Amazon for all of your both fiction and nonfiction works. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add or detract or?
No, the meditation book will be coming out, I hope it's in the next month.
Okay.
I'm working on the title right now.
That's wonderful. It's awesome.
One other thing is I've written this book, Conquering the Winter Blues.
Okay.
And this is just a small book, but it's filled with over 60 steps to tackle the winter blues or depression. And I suffered depression in my life before, and these are things that helped me, plus things that have helped clients over the years. Very simple, nothing complicated. It doesn't go into the psychology of it. It just says, here's some things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Steps.
Some tools. Is this specifically to combat like SAD?
Yes, to combat SAD.
Seasonal affective disorder. Yeah.
It's activities, it's environment, it's social things to do, it's exercise and nature, it's self-care, it's all the different things that you can do. And living here in Fort Wayne, we're in the Northern Hemisphere, and there's a lot of darkness in the winter months. And so it's for people to get depressed. So
absolutely.
I did classes on it here, and people found it beneficial. So I did a little handbook.
Yeah, that's really important. Having most recently lived in Seattle, and been in Seattle through a winter where it's gray. It can be gray morning, noon, and night. That's a very important book. I'm currently in LA, so I'm not suffering as much. But
I got all the issues with the fires and everything.
Yeah, there's always a cost benefit no matter where you are. So, well, thank you again, and hang on for a moment, and I'll stop the recording. Thanks so much, Ellie.
Thank you. And
Ellie, I'm gonna pause the recording for a second, and I'll be right back. I'll be right back.
Okay.
If you need to use the bathroom or anything,
I don't.
Okay.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yep. So you were